Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your latest Manchester United news as we discuss Erik ten Hag's striker options this summer transfer window. Get your pens and paper ready. We've got 6 big targets that Manchester United can look at in the summer transfer window. We're going to be looking at them in depth. We're going to look at what they bring. Very good chat in the chat. I don't know why it got removed actually. Somebody just said, do not buy Santiago Jimenez from PSV. He's overrated and won't work in the Premier League. Well, he's one of the considerations, but so is Mason Greenwood. We're going to delve into that story as well. A little bit of development around it. Does the situation change with Ineos here? Does that solve a problem for Erik ten Hag? We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about, as I said, 6 different targets. And if you're up to the task, I want to see the comment section. If you want to do top 3, or if you're a real hipster, if you want to do a top 5, get in the comments. If you're not watching live, or if you are watching live, come back. Get in the comments with your top 5 striker targets for Man United this summer, because we do have some developments around it and we've got some really good targets to talk about that are realistic, but it is an area that I think we all consider to be very important, but there's a lot of uncertainty about it. You see names being thrown around and you sort of go, maybe. Is it as straightforward for United? We're going to talk about that. Also, Gareth Southgate's been talking about Kobbie Mainoo and dropped a big hint about him potentially being called up and going to the Euros. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for an 18-year-old in a breakout season to go and spend his summer in a major tournament, then be back on tour, then into another season? Look, England have got enough good players. I'd love to see Kobbie Mainoo playing for England, but I also fear about burnout, injury, etc. when you're trying to develop a player. There's a very, very thin line between playing all these minutes and then having no break in the summer. So look, we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But we're going to start off talking about the Mason Greenwood situation, because I think when you ask Manchester United what's going on with Mason Greenwood, and we have asked a few times, you continually get sent back to a statement in August last year. And that statement, I don't think is open for interpretation. But we'll read that statement out. We do have a new ownership with Ineos. Could they bring him back? Because ultimately, if you bring Mason Greenwood back, you don't need a striker. And even anybody can sit there and say that. Whether people want him back or not, you don't need to spend any money on a striker when you've got Mason Greenwood. And Ineos are already hinting about cuts, about moving to a new stadium because it's cheaper, about looking at players with 1 year left on their contract. We get excited about Ineos and this new Manchester United. But as somebody said in the live chat yesterday, the British press are just going to get excited anyway. They're not going to look at any negatives because they want it to work. Whose responsibility is it to look at it and go, well, look, let's hope it does work. Let's hope it is positive. No one can say anything at the moment because they haven't seen anything. But what if we do buy cheap? What if we do bring Greenwood back? What if we do move from Old Trafford because it's cheap? What about that is innovative and an input of funds? Moving stadium because it's cheaper from Old Trafford, bringing players back that maybe shouldn't be here because it's cheaper, looking at players with 1 year left on their contract because it's cheaper, getting rid of players on big wages because it's cheaper, even though they're better than the players you're keeping. I mean, we have to keep an eye out. We've got to keep an eye out for it. Of course we have. Shay33 says, what about Ramos? Has he done that well at PSG and how much would he cost? We'll have to wait and see. But before we get into all of that, a little bit of a personal message. Well, it's not really a personal message. It's a message to all of you. You can scan this QR code next to me to visit Goldbridge Saves Football on Spotify. Give it a listen. Give it a download. All I'm going to say is ultras, ultras, ultras. If you know, you know. This is the podcast that we launched at the start of the season. It's been a real niche, slow builder. A bit of a cult, really. That's why it's called the Ultras. Get involved with the podcast. It comes out every Tuesday and every Friday. There's a new episode yesterday. Please do give it a listen. You can scan that QR code. The reason I'm pushing it is because, one, it'd be great to get more people listening to the podcast who are the United Stand community because you're legends. But also, on Monday, something's going to happen with this podcast that's taking it to the next level, where I think a lot of you will start listening to it anyway and watching it. So get on it when it was hip. You can still get on the bandwagon anyway. The doors are open, but I'm telling you now, get onto it this weekend. Give it a download, give it a listen, give it a follow, and then you'll be part of the Ultras when the big story hits on Monday. Thanks, everyone, for that. Right, let's fly straight into the show. Massive podcast news incoming, says Matthew. Exactly. So We're gonna basically. There was a brilliant article that was done on the BBC website in middle of January, and it was entitled "Who are the strikers that are in Premier League demand?" And it's a good list of strikers that we can look at in relation to what Man United might be looking at in the summer. So we're going to go on to that in a moment. But first of all, I just want to talk about what is the Mason Greenwood scenario. The Mason Greenwood scenario is the starting point here, because if you keep him, you don't need to buy a striker. If you sell him, you probably bring in 40 million quid of pure profit to go towards a striker. So if you end up buying a striker for 60 million, they're only going to cost you 20 because you've got 40 from Greenwood. So, and people say, how does that work? Well, it works like this. Mason Greenwood hasn't played for Manchester United for 2 years. So if you sell Mason Greenwood, it's basically like being given £40 million for free, because he's not part of our plans for the last 2 years. He hasn't played. Nobody sits there and says, oh, I wish Greenwood was fit. Well, they do, but you know what I mean? He's not a viable option for 2 years. So he's not a player that you think and go, oh, when, you know, he's just not there. That doesn't mean he couldn't come back in the summer, but he's not there. So if you sell Greenwood, it's like a £40 million in your pocket. You put that towards a striker, you're probably only spending 20, 30 million pounds on a striker with the Mason Greenwood fee. So I think with Mason Greenwood, there's two potential positives. One, you sell him, and it's a £40 million windfall that you put towards your striker anyway. Two, you keep him, you don't need a striker. So either way, you've got to start off with Mason Greenwood. Now, what's the situation with Manchester United on Mason Greenwood? Is there any viable evidence that Ineos are going to change their opinion and bring him back? Man United will point to you always, when you ask about Mason Greenwood, they'll point to the statement they made on the 21st of August, 2023 at 3 o'clock. And this is what happened. All those involved in this situation, including Mason Greenwood, recognise the difficulties with recommencing his career at Manchester United. It has therefore been mutually agreed that it would be most appropriate for him to do so away from Old Trafford. And we will now work with Mason to achieve that outcome. So Mason Greenwood, Manchester United, recognised the difficulties with him resuming his Manchester United career, and it was agreed by all parties that everybody would work together for him to build a career away from Old Trafford. That's the statement from Manchester United. Is there any change on that statement? No. Is there any wiggle room in that statement? No, not really. It does say that he will be moving away from Man United and they're helping him to do that. So this Getafe journey is basically a journey to sell him in the summer. But there is hope if you want him to come back, because that statement was made by Richard Arnold on the advice and sign-off of the Glazers. We now have a new CEO in Barada. We'll have a new director of football. And, as we've been told, Sir Jim is in charge of the footballing side. So there is leeway to change it. The problematic part of it comes that if you change your opinion on something big like that, then you're actually making a decision that the Glazers wouldn't make, which was going to be unpopular. So it's a big decision to change it, but they could change it. I'm not here to start debating the rights and wrongs about it, because we'll spend another hour talking about stuff we've spent hours talking about. But that's the stance of Manchester United, that Mason Greenwood will continue his career away from Manchester United. So you would be correct in thinking there's a high chance we're going to sell him in the summer, as that statement says. But it could change. It could change. And if it did change, then we're not going to be talking about signing a striker, because we won't need to. If we keep Greenwood, we won't need to sign a striker. It's as simple as that. But let's move along on the assumption that Ineos would not be so, I can't even think of the word. Outrageous, extraordinary, brave to change that opinion, because it will be on them. Who are the strikers that Manchester United could look at? And we're going to look at that now. Mark, Beth Talent ID has to be questioned on Onana, says Ket. And I'm not talking about Onana today. I would go with Pavlidis from AZ Alkmaar, 24 goals this season. Contract ends on 2025. He actually is a consideration, so we're going to talk about him. So that's good talent ID there. And I've been listening to the podcast since the start. Hoyland, special guest. Also, we definitely should stay at Old Trafford. Too much history just to knock down, says Kyle. Thank you very much. Well, scan the QR code. Get on the podcast movement before it blows up on Monday in relation to the announcement. Right, let's go through some of these striker options. Sanil, we're not doing a poll. What do you want to poll on? I wonder if the poll is, Should we bring Mason Greenwood back to Manchester United? Like we seem to do every 2 days. I'm not doing a poll on Mason Greenwood. The poll is 70% yes and 30% no. And it's always been around that. So that's not the point of the show, mate. The point is, if we keep him, we don't need a striker. If we sell him, it'll be a lot of money going towards a striker. So there's 2 scenarios here. That's what we're talking about. Now what we're going to do is, and you can get involved in this, and instead of a poll, why don't you use your fingers and type something? Tell us what your top 5 Manchester United striker targets would be this summer transfer window, because we're going to go through some of the options here. Right, let's start off with Santiago Jimenez. This is a player that gets mentioned a lot in the chat, and I'm not here to dismiss or tell you you're wrong in relation to Jimenez, who is a Mexican striker. He's at PSV, so yes, he's in the Dutch league. Very, very successful there, left footer, and a lot of people think that this lad may well be a good option for Manchester United. Well, the interesting, I mean, I've seen people liken him to Van Persie. I mean, yeah, I don't like likening any player to any player. It's like Mainoo to Pogba, isn't it? Come on, we've got to be better than that. What is Santiago Jimenez? Well, in the Dutch league, he's a left-footed striker who is pretty good at creating his own chances, running the channels. The link-up play's good. He can hold up the play and he can score goals. My big concern with him is, and another positive is it's quite rare that you would pay silly money for an Eredivisie player. It doesn't happen that often. You can normally get good value from the Eredivisie because they do need to sell. Those, Ajax, I mean, look, can I just do a disclaimer? Footnote, Man United's first summer with Ajax, we paid stupid money to Eredivisie clubs, but it doesn't normally happen. And I think that with Jimenez from PSV, I think he's got a contract of about 2027, so he's still got a few years left on his contract. I think you're probably talking somewhere between 40 and 70 million quid for him. My concerns about him is my concerns about Jimenez is that 22, I think there is a bit of a lack of pace. He's not slow, but he ain't Højlund. He certainly ain't Rashford. He's not Haaland. He's not mobile. And I think in the Premier League, the way teams play now with the high line and the press, you do need a bit of mobility. So that would be concern number 1. Concern number 2 would be the price tag against the talent profile, i.e. I think he'll cost somewhere between 40 and 70. Now, if you're paying £70 million for Jimenez from PSV, he hasn't necessarily lit the world on fire outside the Eredivisie when they've played in Europe. And I just think it could easily go wrong. And also, let's not forget, we're looking, like we were talking about last night, about a striker that is there to not take Højlund's place, but work alongside him. So, look, I'm here just to deliver the options. He's an interesting option, Jimenez. But yeah, and also let's not forget, if we do buy somebody from the Eredivisie, you're going to get the normal British pundits going mad about buying players from the Eredivisie again. Sleepster, welcome to the Members Club. Thank you very much. Also, we've got Akash saying, if we are successful in selling Greenwood, I would sign Benzema. Okay, Akash, I was going to mention him. And I fear that FFP might focus is to get Mason back to Old Trafford as an alternative backup for Rasmus and channelise transfer funds towards doubling up our spine. Samir, that's the wrong reason for doing it, but you're right. I'd be disgusted if we did that. If we bring Greenwood back because of price, that's not right. That's completely ignoring the reason he left in the summer. If we're going to be a club that's just about money and doing things for money, that's the wrong reason to do it. Bring him back because you think he's the player that's going to make Man United better. Don't bring him back because you can't afford to buy another striker. That's morally not the right thing to do. You make a stand and you do it for the right reasons, or you sell him. You don't bring him back because you can't afford to bring anyone else in. That won't please anybody. And also, that's a very similar situation to Old Trafford, isn't it? If you're going to rip the soul out of this football club and knock Old Trafford down to build a new stadium because it's new, that's not what people want to hear. So, look, we can't be... There's no change if we're going to make decisions because of money. That's just Sir Jim with a Glazers t-shirt on. We're meant to be doing things to make Manchester United better, whilst maintaining, respecting our amazing history and legacy. Anyway, so that's Santiago Jimenez. The plus now about Barada and a new director of football is that we will no longer be looking at the obvious targets. We will get surprises. I hope so. So look, Jimenez is an interesting one. Next one I'm going to talk about, I'm going to skim through them. Like Chopper Mooting, I don't want to talk about Chopper Mooting much. We have been linked to him 2 summers in a row. I can't dismiss Choupo-Moting because he's a cheap option from Bayern Munich. He's 34. He could come into Man United and be a really cheap backup striker. So we can't ignore this because we don't know. This is why I'm looking forward to doing this little section, because we can all say Jimenez, we can all say Osimhen, but the reality is it could be Choupo-Moting because we don't know the budgets and we don't know what we're looking to do. And Man United might look at it and go, yeah, let's save a load of money and let's get Choupo-Moting on cheap, who can just do a good job for a year or two as a backup to Rasmus. And they might look at it like that. In the same hand, I mean, I don't want that to happen, but I'm just throwing you some names. Same hand, they might look at Benzema. I don't know how you do a Benzema deal, but again, you know, well past his mid-30s, top striker in his day, very expensive wages, comes to Manchester United on a short-term deal. Benzema, again, I don't think it is about what we should be doing, but you can't rule it out as something that United will do because we don't know what Ineos are going to do. I would agree with what was just said there about Barada. I don't think Barada's going to be looking at Choupo-Moting and Benzema when you look at what he's been talking about when he was at Man City, but we have to consider them. Fourth option, Evan Ferguson. Look, I'd love this. I'd love this deal. It's probably my number 1 option. I don't think we need an experienced striker. I think Evan Ferguson is experienced in the Premier League. And I think if you had Ferguson and Rasmus as your 2 strikers, young strikers, good relationship, working together, competing with each other to play up front for Manchester United, it would be the dream. But unfortunately, he's just signed the new contract till 2029. And I think the bidding would start at £100 million. So that has to take us out. We can't spend... Even I, who wants Ferguson at United, I cannot justify spending over £70 million on a striker who isn't actually going to be our starting striker because we've got Rasmus. So it doesn't make any sense, as much as it would make sense financially. It's a bit like what we said about Frenkie de Jong last night. Guirassy is somebody that we have to bear in mind as well. Obviously, we were looking at him in January. He's quick, Bundesliga striker. He scored a few goals for Stuttgart. I don't like it. I don't like it, really. It doesn't... It feels to me like the sort of striker that could be another Weghorst. You know, it could be. It could easily be another Weghorst, where it just doesn't fill me with enough excitement or belief that it would be enough. But look, you know, some of you do like Guirassy. Mark, Guehi, Nabry, Ferguson, Todibo, Frimpong. They're not all strikers, fat boy. Gifted 5 memberships, Samir, thank you very much. And Shane says, we need an older proven striker to nurture Højlund. I don't think we do. Ten Hag might agree with you, Samir, and it's a fair point, but I don't think... I mean, where are we defining age? We need an older striker to nurture Højlund. Why does... I mean, I'm fortunate enough you've seen the interview with Rasmus. You know, when you know what the player's like and his personality's like, he's not like a normal 18, 19, 20-year-old striker. You know, it reminds me of Rooney in the sense that, did Rooney need someone to nurture him and tell him what to do? He's got a really strong belief and character. Erling Haaland has as well. Does Erling Haaland need someone to nurture him? Did he need someone to nurture him at Dortmund when he was like 19, 20? I don't think we need this older striker. I really don't. I think what you need is a striker to compete with him, a striker to work with him. That could be Evan Ferguson. You know, that could be Jimenez. You don't need to be over 25. Look, I said it last night, I would like Ollie Watkins. I really would, but we won't do that deal because Villa quite rightly will want ridiculous money. But I don't think we need to be looking at people over 25. I really don't. Anyway, let's carry on with this. This one's really interesting, and I don't know a lot about him, and I can't even pronounce his name. He was formerly at Coventry. Victor Gyökeres. He's actually Swedish, and he's done really well since he went from Coventry to Sporting Lisbon. They apparently have a 100 million release clause on him. Now, in many ways, I'd prefer this guy over Jimenez because he's quicker for a start, and I think his profile at Sporting Lisbon is more reflective of being able to do it in the Premier League than Jimenez in the Eredivisie. But I don't think it's realistic. I can't even bloody pronounce his name. But he is an interesting striker in the sense that he has got that... he's got a lot of important striker traits, and he is more mobile than some of the other people that we've mentioned. Scored a lot of goals after going from Coventry to Sporting Lisbon. Again, he's a striker that can create his own chances. He can occupy the defenders. If they play a high line, he can get in behind. But the price is going to be ridiculous, and that would be, you know, very, 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 very difficult for Manchester United to do. Pio is mentioning Jonathan David. I've seen a few people talk about Jonathan David. I've never been massively impressed with him. I know I've mentioned him maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but he hasn't kicked on enough for me in the last 2 years for me to go, let's go and get him. As a backup striker for 20 million, 30 million, then, you know, I'm not saying it's not impossible. It depends what you want in your backup striker, doesn't it? Do you want someone who's going to sit on the bench and come off the bench and score you a couple of goals every now and again? Or do you want somebody that, if Rasmus is out of form or injured, can actually play up front and worry the top defenders in the world and in the league? And I think we need the latter. We're Manchester United. And if you're going to do that, then Jonathan David's not the one to me. We talk about Sancho being a problem for our FFP. Question for everyone, is Anthony going to be a massive problem as well? Of course he is, Lee, for the same reasons. You can't sell Anthony because we'd be absolutely screwed. Didn't you say Osman and Højlund would be perfect as Partip? I think I probably said that in the summer. When you go for a younger striker and a more experienced striker, the problem with going with an Osman now, or a Harry Kane now, is Osman or Kane have to start, so Rasmus goes to the bench. And I think over the last 6 months, Rasmus has gone through an apprenticeship that makes him the starting striker. So why should he go and sit on the bench for Osman? So I don't think that sort of thing, in my opinion, works. Dan, welcome to Members Club. But yeah, I'm not going to pretend. Scholes says Garassi is a one-season wonder. He can't sustain his performance in the long term. I'm not going to pretend that I know loads and loads about this Victor Gyökeres, who is Swedish. I don't, but the little I do know, I think he probably looks more suitable than Santiago Jimenez, but has a 100 million release clause and would be ridiculously hard to get hold of. Some of these strikers are strikers that clubs will be looking at as their starting striker. Let's be honest. What we're looking at is a striker that isn't going to be our starting striker, but can compete to be our starting striker with Rasmus. So there is a profile. Somebody quite rightly mentioned the AZ Alkmaar striker, Pavlidis, who is a Greek striker. He has been linked to Chelsea, Fulham, AC Milan and Barcelona, to be fair. He's 25. He's scoring a few goals in the Eredivisie again. I'm going to be honest on this because I know a little bit about him like I know about Jimenez, and I don't think that Pavlidis is the right striker for us. Again, not particularly fast or mobile. He reminds me of a striker. He reminds me of a bit of a penalty box striker, and it doesn't really... I think if you're going to be a Man United striker, as we've seen over recent years, you can be a penalty box striker, but you might find yourself very, very disillusioned very, very quickly. I think you've got to do a lot more than that. You've got to carry the ball. You've got to hold up the ball. You've got to run the channels quickly. You've got to get in behind. You've got to be mobile. And I would worry that this guy just is not mobile enough for what is needed in the Premier League. And that's not to say he won't go to an AC Milan and do well, but we do have to acknowledge the profile of a striker required in the modern day Premier League. And I think that the athleticism and energy of teams, and we talk about pace like it's exclusive to wingers and strikers. Pace is all over the pitch now. Centre-backs have got it. Goalkeepers have got it. Full-backs obviously have it. Wingers, strikers, even midfielders. It's so tenacious and quick that I think if you come into a league and you don't have that pace, you tend to struggle because the lines are higher, people are passing out from the back, they're moving through the phases of play quickly, and the game can just pass you by if you want to be a striker that just focuses on penalty box attention. It might never come. What watch along are you doing today, Mark? Says Hazim. I'm doing Everton City at lunchtime, actually, and I'm on TalkSport later, so I'm looking at that. What about Mallon? Could be a great super sub, says ADM. Well, I think it's a good consideration. I think United might go back in for him. Other names of interest, of course, in the Premier League, Solanke, but again, I think Bournemouth are going to want big, big money for him, and he only signed a new deal in September, so Solanke, I think, is a risk as well. Solanke's got nothing on the build-up. I don't think he's had an assist all season, in fact. He is a striker who is quick. He can run in behind, he can finish, but on the build-up play, next to nothing. So I don't think Solanke would be a consideration, and he'd be very expensive. Ivan Toney, again, we've spoken about him a few times. I'm sure he's a consideration. 1 year left on his contract. You've got to bring that price right down for it to be viable. I don't think he's better than Rasmus in the long term for Man United. So if you wanted Toney, it's got to be 50 million or less. I don't know whether Brentford are going to do that sort of a deal. So Toney, we've spoken about in excess. Vlahovic is always a player that comes up. I can't believe he's still only 23. I feel like Vlahovic should be 33. He seems to have been around for ages. Obviously, he's at Juventus at the moment. They're open to a sale, so Vlahovic is interesting. Seems to have been around for ages and could actually be the sort of striker that you brought to Manchester United and was willing to come in and work and alongside Rasmus. Xerxes is another player that we've mentioned, of course, at Bologna. Of course, Fabrizio doesn't think he's the profile of striker that Man United probably need. But look, there are a lot of options there. And what I would like you to do is give us your top 5, not necessarily in the live chat. If you're not watching live, put it in the comments because it's easier. And if you are watching live, make sure you put it in the comments afterwards. But there's a lot in there, isn't there? And I think that's always a positive. We started off with the Greenwood scenario. If he stayed at United, which I think is still unlikely, you wouldn't need to do any of this. If you sell him, 40 million quid, straight away goes to some of these strikers. And how many have we spoken about there? We've spoken about the Greek guy, the Mexican guy in Eredivisie. We've spoken about the Sporting Lisbon striker, Xerxes in Bologna. Vlahovic is in Serie A as well. Garassi. There are Toney. There are a lot of options out there. There's a lot of options, and they're just players that we're talking about. Who knows what other people might be being scouted. So I think this is going to become more of a prevalent conversation over the coming weeks because we do need to bring a striker in. But there are a lot of options out there. But the parameters are difficult to predict at the moment. What type of a striker are we looking for? Are we looking for a bench striker who's a little bit more experienced? In which case, maybe Jonathan David is the guy. Are we looking for a starting striker that's going to, push Rasmus out the team? In which case, you're probably looking at people like Osman. I don't think we will do that. Or are we looking for somebody that's going to come in and compete with Rasmus to provide competition for a team that wants to go places? In which case, you could be looking at a Vlahovic or a Jimenez or someone like that. And I think United need to figure that out. But obviously they can't do that until we get the director of football, which we're still waiting to happen. Mbumo at Brentford is a great option, and Shea Adams was everywhere else on as backups, says Netflix and Chilwell. Not sure either of those are going to be that popular, to be honest. Openda is young, quick, and can play on the wing, says Luke. And again, another decent alternative from Luke, and there will be others. Do we need an out-and-out striker, or do you go for somebody like a Malen who can play across the front three? And that'd be interesting as well. Not Now Dave says, what about Martial, or has that ship sailed? Maybe now he's had the operation, his continued injuries may have been fixed. I mean, it's a great question, Not Now Dave, but if I did a poll on should we keep Martial, which I'm going to do I'm just going to do it. Let's do it. Should we keep Martial? I will tell you now that United will not be keeping Anthony Martial. And it's financial. He's out of contract in the summer. They won't authorise a new contract for a player that in the last couple of years has spent most of his time injured and out of form. They won't authorise it, so it won't happen. And I don't think Martial will sign it, because if Martial signs it, there's probably not much of a signing on fee, whereas if he goes to another club, he can make a bit more money, I think. So it just won't happen with Martial. And there's no swap deal to do, Montana, because he's out of contract. Martial, let's be honest, Anthony Martial is basically earning around 200 grand a week until the summer to do nothing, like he has done for the last 5 months. And that has to be part of the old regime. It's not Martial's fault, by the way. He's got a contract. If somebody said to you, you're on a 5-year contract on 200 grand a week, and in your final year, you're injured and the club don't really want you and they're trying to force you out, are you going to help the club to do that? Or are you just going to sit there and earn your money? And that's what he's doing. I mean, he's going to get himself fit, injury-free, for his own benefit in the summer, isn't he? But I don't see any point in keeping Anthony Martial at Manchester United, because it's the past. And, we sort of did that with Phil Jones when we gave him a contract. And I think it would be a really, really a really, really silly thing to do. Just going to talk to you about what Gareth Southgate's had to say about Kobbie Mainoo. First England senior call-up seems inevitable and could happen as early as next month with the March international break. But this is what Southgate had to say. He said, he's doing brilliantly. I'm not certain he's necessarily going to be a defensive midfielder. He's quite a progressive player, but he's had a fabulous start to his career, and it will be good to monitor him as we go forward. So, look, he's definitely on the radar of England. I suppose the question for you is, and I'll do a poll on it actually, because the Martial one's going to be a landslide. But I suppose the question on Mainoo is how do you look at it? I mean, on the one hand, the fact that he wasn't even in the United team a few months ago because he was injured. This was his breakthrough season. He's got into the first team. He's been an absolute revelation. And we're now talking about an England call-up and potentially going to the Euros in the summer. Completely selfishly, I'm looking forward to the Euros. I want to see Rashford on the wing. I want to see Harry Maguire at centre-back. I want to see Kobbie Mainoo in the midfield with Bellingham and Rice. Yeah, I do. And the most exciting player out of those three would be Kobbie Mainoo in the midfield with Bellingham and Rice. I'm looking forward to it. I want to see Bruno doing well. Hopefully Delo will go there as well. Rasmus with Denmark. I want to see Man United players playing in the Euros because it adds to the tournament when you see your players playing. And that's selfish, of course. I do want to see that. But on a more sensible level, he's only 18. And his body's going to be growing over the next 2 years, definitely. And how do you grow a body when it's constantly doing things? It's like going down to the gym twice a day, every day. Everybody knows you need to recover your muscles for them to grow and get stronger. And this is the problem. If you're someone who goes down the gym, or if you're somebody who does anything where it's based on rest and recuperation and improvement, this is where England for years has destroyed footballers. This is why Rooney was done in his late 20s. Michael Owen was done in his late 20s. And there's loads of other players as well. It's because we absolutely burn them out in their late teens and early 20s. And the bottom line is, Mainoo, by the summer, will be exhausted because he's only 18 and he's gone from youth football to first team football, and his body will be exhausted by the time he hits May. And the best thing for him, any physio, any sports science person will tell you, is as much rest as you can give him. Well, at the end of May, the season ends, and then you get five weeks, really, where you can recuperate, chill, and then come back for the new season on the tour. If he goes to the Euros, goes straight into a major tournament where he'll be training intensely, he'll come back, he'll get 2 weeks off at best, and then he's into another season where we will hopefully be back in Europe. Where's the break? And that's the thing as well. We are always short-term in football. We are always recency bias in football. But trust me, the older you get, or the more experienced you get in watching football, the more you see this. We are playing ridiculous amounts of football, and I think it would be a bad thing for Mainoo and a bad thing for Man United. But then there is that selfish element of me that's like, I do want to see him play for England in the summer. Dan says, it's great to be back as a member again. I had a few issues with my payments and account a few weeks ago. Happy to support you, Mark. United stand, the amazing community. Love you all. Dan, thank you very much. Hope you're doing well, mate. Absolute legend. Get your badge in, of course. Okay, so 92% of you would not want Anthony Martial to stay at Manchester United. Fair play to the 8%. I didn't even think it would be that much, but fair play to that. Let's do this. Should Mainoo go to the Euros? Yes or no? Because that is a different type of question. That's not just about whether you want him to go. It's whether he should go. And on pure talent, I think there is a case. It's not like, I do think there is a case. And Gareth Southgate's got no loyalty or care for Manchester United. He's just got to pick the squad he wants. And there would be a lot of excitement about that. But, yeah, I do want him to go. I think he's good enough to go. But from a purely selfish Man United point of view, and I guarantee Ten Hag would agree, I'd love him not to go. But you know what? The way England works, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. Just looking into the De Jong contract, and it seems he's only on about 300k a week, not 700k a week. Barca have just been paying him back his deferred wages, says Duncania. There you go. That's interesting. But Sleepster, thanks for being a member, mate. He should be in the squad, says James. Southgate won't give him much game time anyway, mate, says Turp. And that's where I was going to go next. I don't want him to go to the Euros, be training for a month, not playing for the team, and going for experience. Fuck that. He can watch that on a TV screen when he's on holiday with his mates, chilling out, recuperating. He doesn't need to go to the Euros for experience. He doesn't need that. That's a waste of time. Like, he either goes and plays or he stays at home and stays. Because you're right. It will be Bellingham, it will be Rice, and we know what Southgate will do. He'll pick Henderson, he'll pick Phillips, and then Mainoo won't get any game time. So, yeah, you make a great point there. This is Southgate, isn't it? This is not a manager that's known for actually doing what's right. So, yeah, I don't want Mainoo. You've made my mind up. I don't want him to go because he won't play him. He won't pick him. He'll just be there training for a month, exhausted when he comes back to us, and he'll have been sat watching Calvin Phillips and Jordan Henderson play for England in the Euros. So, yeah, you made my mind up on that. He won't pick him anyway. So, I hope he doesn't take him to the Euros. The lad is going to be at the reserves. Let him have a break, says Regan. I agree with that. It's a good point, says Savage. It is. I'd only just thought about that. Jude weren't to the Euros at 17. It didn't hurt him. He needs the experience, says Lil. And I agree when you said it like that, Mark. What's the point in picking him if he's not going to play? He needs game time, says Ibnu. Yeah, and look, if you're not an England fan or you don't know how England works, Southgate is the sort of guy that picks favourites. So some people would say that there's a lot of centre-backs that should have been given game time over the last couple of years that he never picks because he always goes with Maguire and Stones. And it's the same in the midfield. Like, Ward-Prowse is probably one of the best midfielders in England this year. Can't get in the team. Yet Calvin Phillips will get picked who can't get in the West Ham team. So, yeah, there's no point in taking Mainoo just to go for a holiday and an experience. He needs recuperation. And you don't get recuperation. People say, "Oh, take him for the experience." You don't get recuperation. You will be training intensely all week and then not playing in the game. It's not a break. He needs a break. He needs a break. But we're talking about this in February. You know, what he needs at the moment is to play for Manchester United. Without a shadow of a doubt. Massively important player. Mainoo needs the Euros call-up, more experience and mentality, being around Kane, Rice, Bellingham. I completely disagree with you, Anthony. Like, why does it benefit Mainoo to go and train with Bellingham, Rice and Kane for another month instead of having a rest? When he's at Man United, he's training with people like Bruno and Rashford and Casemiro and Varane. Like, that doesn't make any... In my opinion, that doesn't make any sense to a tired player at the end of the season to go and spend a month in an intensive training camp and not play. And the positive is I get to train with Jude Bellingham. And I don't think that in any way compares to having a month off and letting your body rest and recuperate, and your mind. If he's going to go, for me, the bottom line is if he's going to the Euros, he's got to play. If he's going to the Euros for experience, forget about it. If I was Ten Hag and I found out, I'd just say, Kobbie, have you got a calf problem? No, Kobbie, have you got a calf problem? No, I'm absolutely fine. Kobbie, have you got a calf problem? Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah, he can't go. He's got a calf problem. You know, the young player will always be enthusiastic. Rooney is a prime example of this. I want to play, I want to play, I want to play, want to play. And Rooney was done in his late 20s because he wanted to play. You've got to look after them. You've got to look after them. And rest and recuperation, nobody ever wants to do it. You know, as I said, if you're somebody who wants to run a marathon, you want to run every day 5K and get better and better. But rest and recuperation will make you run on the day better on the day after. You go for a run every day. By day 3, you're not operating anywhere near as good as you can. You have a rest, you will do. Do you think a winger could be a target this summer? I'd love Kvaratskhelia, says S. Singh. Well, Elisi's a player that a lot of people are obsessed with at the moment, but there was a great point a moment ago about how Anthony is a problem financial fair play-wise. We've spoken about Sancho. Sancho is a big problem financial fair play because we spent £75 million on him 2.5 years ago. And because of financial fair play and amortization, if you sell him for 40 million, FFP won't register that because it's not... There's still a lot of the contract left and the 75 million is sort of spread across that. So the profit there is not very much. Well, it's the same with Anthony. It's only year 2 with Anthony and we spent £80 million on him. So if you sell him for 50, you've made a loss on FFP. So there's no profit coming in. Yeah, I don't know whether we'll buy a winger. You've got Ahmad as well. I think we'll sell Pellistri. I think there is a really... somebody said it on the chat yesterday, so I'm not claiming this, but I think it's true. There is a hint with United at the moment that when a player goes on loan, they normally get sold. A lot of the players that go... I think there is a pattern that if you go on loan, you're probably going to get sold. Whereas if you're good enough, you tend to not go on loan, don't you? I think Dan Gore and Hugel is different, but I think with the likes of Pellistri and Brandon Williams and Mabry and Fernandez, I think that is a pattern that we are starting to see. If you're going to buy a winger, you've got to remove a winger. So if Sancho goes, I think we will bring a winger in. But I mean, Anthony's almost a show in himself, isn't he? And I don't think he's not going to go anywhere in the summer. We can't afford to do anything about it. I still hope that Anthony can turn it around, but you know, even I have concerns about it because there just doesn't seem to be a grasp of the enormity of the job. We saw it against Newport where he scores a goal and he's kissing the badge, and it's like, I think, you know, I was speaking to somebody at Carrington when I was there a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about players, and they were saying, you know, Anthony's the nicest guy. He's like such a nice guy. He's so desperate to be liked by the fans, and you know, he's well liked in the squad. Really nice guy. And I said, but you know, that can be a bad thing. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, because like he scores a goal against Newport, he's kissing the badge, and the fans are intelligent. They're going, yeah, he's kissing the badge. That's nice, but it's Newport. Like there's levels. Like scoring against Newport and kissing the badge, score at Anfield and kiss the badge. Like there's levels to this game, and I think at the moment Anthony's just ridiculously naive to what the levels are. It's Manchester United. Scoring a goal isn't enough. It's consistency, and it's doing it against big teams. If he comes on against Villa tomorrow and it's 0-0 and he skips past two players and bends it in the top corner, you know, that's your redemption arc. But your redemption arc is never going to be Newport kissing the badge. It's got to be better than that. And I don't think Anthony's figured that out yet. I don't think he's figured out this fan base, this league, or what's expected of him. And that can be, it's just naivety. You can see that naivety. You can see on his face sometimes he does something and he thinks it's better than it actually is. And it's about understanding, settling, and I am concerned. I don't know. This could go one of two ways. There could be a redemption arc. I really hope there is. But it could be a complete and utter failure as a signing. And the longer it takes, the more likely it will be a failure. But look, he's well liked. He's hard-working. But we're not seeing the talent enough. We're not seeing the potential enough. And that, people might say you're being harsh there, but it's nothing personal. It's the same as anybody else. It's always about footballing ability. We talk about Scott McTominay or not. Nice guy, well liked around Man United, just not good enough. And that obviously hurts those players when they hear it, but it's not like you haven't had enough chances, is it? You know, it's not like, you know, there's any potential there. You are what you are. You know, I've said before, Nicky Butt, Phil Neville at Scott McTominay's age, very, very good players, decided they wanted to go and play good first-team football, went to Newcastle and Everton. Like, nobody should have a divine right to stay at Man United just because you've got a contract. Like, we need to set the standards. Going to the Euros will be a benefit, moral boost for him and experience being in the setup, says Mekki. Question at this stage, what's best for him, experience or a rest in the summer? I'd lean to rest, says Mekki. Yeah, I think he will want to go, but we all know through experience that rest is the main thing, definitely. Sir Alex would never let him go to England anyway, says Joseph. I think those days have gone though, haven't they, where, you know, Ryan Giggs used to pull out of Welsh duty all the time for the benefit of Man United, let's be honest, but I think those days have gone now. It seems to be harder to pull people out of international football. I mean, look at Bruno. You know, he just never, ever stops, does he? Anyway, look, thanks everyone for watching this morning. I'm back live again very, very soon, actually. Lunchtime kickoff on That's Football. Man City against Everton. I'll be doing a watch-along for that. Few topics to talk about there. Apparently, the rumour is this morning that Southgate's going to stay as England manager. Surprise, surprise. I knew it was a trap. Anyway, join me for that at lunchtime. And on your way out, get onto this before it blows up on Monday. Goldbridge Saves Football Podcast. Scan the QR code. Give us a follow. Give it a download. Give it a try. and get on the Goldbridge Saves Football bandwagon, because on Monday it's about to go nuclear and you want to be on it before it was popular. Thanks everyone. Take care. I'll speak to you all in a bit.